Okay, so are you ready to dive into the world of parental monitoring apps? Like, specifically uMobix. It's been getting a lot of attention lately, right? Some good, some not so good. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to go through, marketing stuff from uMobix themselves, reviews from actual parents who've used it, even articles comparing it to other apps out there. So, what do you say? Ready to figure out if uMobix is something that might be good for, like, your family?
Yeah, sounds like a plan. It's definitely a hot topic, right? But with all the concerns about kids online these days, lots to talk about.
Totally. So, first things first, what exactly is uMobix? For those who might not know, what does it actually do?
Well, basically, it's a mobile phone monitoring app. It's like it gives parents a way to keep tabs on their kids' phones. I mean, everything. It was launched back in 2020 by a company called Erston Group. And, their marketing really focuses on safety and stuff, protecting kids from cyberbullying and all that.
Right, and I'm seeing that real-time monitoring is a big part of their pitch. It's not just like you check in every once in a while. It's more like you have a direct line into what's happening on the phone anytime you want.
Exactly. They talk about features that can capture screenshots, messages, even keystrokes as they happen. Imagine being able to see every text your kid sends, every website they visit, even if they try to delete it later. Powerful stuff.
That's kind of what makes it a little unsettling too, right? Like how much is too much? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? It's this balance between wanting to keep kids safe, but also respecting their privacy. But before we go too deep into that, maybe let's lay out some of the practicalities. First off, uMobix works on Android and iOS devices, but there's a catch.
Yeah, I was reading that the features are different depending on if your kid has an Android or an iPhone. So what's the difference?
Well, Apple's operating system is way more locked down than Android, so uMobix can access a lot more on Android devices. On iPhones, they're limited by what Apple allows, which means some of the big features like the keylogger, call recording, even geofencing, they just don't work.
Wait, hold on. Geofencing? I'm not sure I know what that is.
Oh yeah, good point. Geofencing is you set up these virtual boundaries on a map. You could, for example, get an alert if your kid leaves school during the day
Hmm.
or goes into some area that you don't want them to be in. It's something a lot of parents, they like it for peace of mind.
Okay, that makes sense. So am I getting this right? If my kid has an iPhone, I might be paying for features I can't even use.
Pretty much, yeah. And speaking of paying, let's talk about the cost. uMobix isn't exactly cheap. They've got these different plans, monthly, quarterly, yearly. But no matter what, each subscription is only for one device. So if you've got multiple kids with smartphones, it can add up fast.
Yikes. Yeah, it's like another phone bill on top of your regular one. But I mean, I guess it depends how much you value, having that kind of monitoring. So let's get into what you get for your money. What are the features that really stand out?
Well, they really go all in on social media monitoring. I mean, that seems to be what they're known for.
Yeah, I think they say they cover over 20 different platforms. Isn't that a lot?
It is. I mean, we're talking Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, even Tinder. And it's not just seeing what they post publicly either. They're talking about seeing private messages and chats too. Some of these reviews even say they can see activity on secret accounts.
Raises some serious privacy questions, if you ask me.
Whoa. It's like, do you really want to see every little thing your kid is saying online? I mean, where's the line?
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But let's put that aside for a second and talk about another big feature, the keylogger.
Okay, I've heard of keyloggers, but I don't really get what they do. It's just logging every time they press a key. Basically, yeah, it records every single keystroke your child makes. So potentially you could see every word they type, even if they delete it afterwards. Passwords, searches, private messages, you name it.
Wow. That's intense. I can see how that might be appealing to some parents, but also kind of feels like an invasion of privacy.
Definitely. I mean, it's one of those features that could be misused. Makes you wonder if it's more about surveillance than safety.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get why this app is so controversial. It's like you want to keep your kids safe, but at the same time, you don't want to be snooping on them constantly.
It's a tough call. And to complicate things even more, there's also the issue of whether the app is truly undetectable.
Oh, right. I saw some reviews where parents were saying their kids figured out they were being monitored.
Yep. And if the whole idea is to have this secret window into what they're doing, it kind of defeats the purpose if they know they're being watched, right? But before we get into those reviews, there are a couple more features uMobix talks about. One is GPS tracking.
Okay, so that one's pretty simple, right? You can see where your kid is on a map.
More than that, you get real-time updates. Like, you
Mm,
can see their movements as they happen. Plus, it saves historical data, so you can go back and see where they've been. No more, I was at the library, if you see they were actually hanging out at the park.
gotcha.
Mm.
So no more sneaking off. What else is there?
They also have a remote control feature. This is where you can, like, lock their device remotely, block specific apps, even take control of the camera, I think. They say it's for managing screen time or making sure they're doing homework, but I can see how that could feel controlling.
Yeah, big brother-ish. Suddenly you're popping up on their phone and locking it while they're talking to their friends. Not very subtle.
Exactly. And it gets back to that whole question of trust. How much control is too much, right?
Yeah, like,
But let's get to what people are actually saying about uMobix. We've got a ton of user reviews here, and they're all over the place.
okay, spill the tea. What are parents saying? What's the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Well, on the plus side, there are tons of parents who love it. They say it's easy to use, and it gives them a sense of control over what their kids are doing online. Especially for parents who are worried about social media, it seems to do what they want.
Makes sense. But I'm guessing there's another side to this story.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There are also a lot of negative reviews, and some of them, well, they're pretty harsh. Parents complaining about hidden fees, bad customer service, and that the app isn't as undetectable as uMobix claims.
Hold on, hidden fees. What does that even mean?
Like, some users say they got hit with extra charges they weren't expecting, like automatic renewals they couldn't turn off, or charges for features they thought were already included in their plan. And some say they had trouble getting refunds or even getting in touch with customer service when they had problems.
Uh-oh. That's never a good sign. It makes you wonder if you can even trust the company.
It does. And then there are the reviews that go even further. They actually call uMobix a scam.
Whoa, seriously, what are they saying?
We see reports of like unauthorized charges, people being billed after they canceled, and claims that the app just straight up doesn't work. Some even say it messed up their kid's phone.
Yikes. Damaged phones. That's scary. I mean, scams. That's even worse. Makes you think twice about giving them your credit card, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely concerning, right? It's important to, remember that reviews can be fake, both good and bad. But when you see this many people saying the same kinds of things, well, it's a red flag.
Totally. It sounds like with uMobix, it's really hit or miss. Some parents love it. Some feel like they got ripped off. Makes it even harder to know if it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it does. And it just shows how important it is to do your research, right? Read the fine print, look at it from all sides before you jump in. But even if we ignore all that, the cost and the bad reviews and all that, there's still a bigger issue here.
You mean like the whole ethical thing? Even if uMobix works perfectly, is it even right to be monitoring our kids this much? Is it going too far?
Exactly. It's a question every parent has to think about.
Right.
How much monitoring is too much? Where do you draw the line between protecting your kids and respecting their privacy?
Yeah, it's a tough one. On the one hand, I totally get it. The internet can be a scary place. And as parents, of course, we want to keep our kids safe. But then again, shouldn't kids have some privacy, like some space to be themselves?
Absolutely, they should. And that's what makes this so complicated. The sources we looked at actually had strong arguments on both sides of this whole issue.
Yeah, I noticed that. What were some of the things that stood out to you?
Well, the people who are for monitoring, they really focused on the dangers kids face online. We're talking cyberbullying,
Yeah.
inappropriate content, online predators, that kind of thing. And I mean, those are real things. It makes sense that parents would want to protect their kids.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it feels like the world has gotten so much more complicated for kids. It's not just about keeping them safe from strangers in the park anymore. It's about this whole online world that we as parents might not even understand ourselves.
That's a really good point. And the people who are for monitoring, they say that parents have a responsibility to know what their kids are doing online, just like they would in, the real world.
Right. You wouldn't let your kid just wander off into a dangerous neighborhood without knowing where they're going. So why would you let them do whatever they want online with no supervision?
Exactly. But then there's the other side of the argument.
Which is?
The people who are worried about privacy, they say that too much monitoring can actually be bad for kids.
How so?
Well, one thing is, it can hurt the trust between parents and kids. If kids feel like they're always being watched, they might not want to talk to their parents about, stuff they're struggling with, and they might start to feel ashamed of what they do online, which could actually push them to do even riskier stuff.
Right, because if they know you're going to freak out, if they visit a certain website or talk to a certain person, they're just going to do it behind your back, right? and then you won't know anything.
Exactly. And then there's the argument that too much monitoring can, like, stop kids from growing up and becoming independent. Part of being a kid is learning to make your own choices, right? Even if you make mistakes, if parents are always stepping in and controlling everything online, kids don't get that chance to learn.
It's like that saying, give them roots and wings. You want them to have a safe foundation, but you also want them to be able to explore on their own.
Exactly. And some experts think that digital monitoring can, like, get in the way of that. It makes kids feel like they need their parents to make decisions for them, and it stops them from learning how to think for themselves and stay safe online.
So it sounds like there are good points on both sides.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as just saying monitoring is good or monitoring is bad. It's about like finding the right balance between protecting them and giving them freedom. And that's probably different for every family.
Oh, for sure. It's not one size fits all, right? It depends on how old the kid is, how mature they are, what the family believes in, and how they talk to each other, and, what specific things they're worried about.
Right. It's not just about the app, it's about the people.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us back to the question, is uMobix the right tool for your family? We've seen that it has some powerful features, especially for social media, but it's also expensive, it doesn't work as well on iPhones, and there are some pretty negative reviews out there.
Yeah, those scam accusations are kind of scary. Makes you wonder if it's worth the risk.
It does. And even if we ignore that stuff, there's still the ethical side of things. Being able to see every keystroke, control the camera remotely, that's a lot of power, It could be misused.
Totally. I mean, it's one thing to keep an eye on what your kid is doing online, but having that much access feels like, I don't know, like you're crossing a line. It could actually make things worse.
It's a risk, for sure. Parents have to weigh that. Is it worth it? Is the safety worth the potential damage to their relationship with their kid? It's not an easy answer.
Definitely something to think about. Okay, so let's go over what we've learned about uMobix so far, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay, so uMobix is marketed to parents who are worried about their kids' online safety. They really push real-time monitoring and all those features we talked about. It works on both Android and iOS, but remember, it doesn't work the same on both. You get the full package on Android, social media tracking, key logging, GPS, remote control, all that. But iPhones, well, because of Apple, you're going to be limited.
And don't forget the price. It's not cheap, especially if you've got more than one kid.
Right. And even though uMobix says it's easy to use, the reviews, well, they're mixed. Some parents say it's great, but others say it's a nightmare. Hidden fees, bad customer service, the app not being undetectable, all that stuff.
And then, of course, there are the people who say it's a scam. Yikes.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, do your research before you sign up for any monitoring app. Don't just believe the marketing stuff. Read reviews, think about the ethics of it all, and make the decision that's right for your family. Don't just jump in without thinking.
Very good advice. Okay, so we talk a lot about uMobix itself, but what about other options? Are there any other apps worth looking at?
Yeah. Let's talk about the competition because, uMobix isn't the only game in town. We saw a bunch of other parental monitoring apps mentioned in our research.
Right. I saw names like XRXES, mSpy, Qustodio, and Aura. What can you tell us about those?
Well, each one has its own, good and bad points. They all have different ways of approaching this whole monitoring thing. Let's start with XRXES. They seem to be like uMobix's biggest rival.
Okay, so XRXES is the head-to-head competitor. What makes them different?
Well, like uMobix, they've got a ton of features. Social media, GPS, calls and messages, remote control, all that. But there are some key differences.
Like what?
One thing is geofencing. Remember how that lets you set up like virtual boundaries and get alerts if your kid leaves a certain area? Well, XRXCS has that and uMobix doesn't.
Right. So if knowing where your kid is at all times is really important to you, XRXCS might be better. Anything else?
They're also cheaper than uMobix, especially if you sign up for a longer plan. And, maybe most importantly, people seem to think their customer service is better. Which, after all those complaints about uMobix, that could be a big deal.
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with hidden fees and unhelpful customer service, especially for something like this. Okay, so XRXCS is definitely worth a look. What about mSpy? What's their deal?
mSpy is really good at deep monitoring, especially when it comes to social media. They say they can track even more platforms than uMobix, and they give you more detailed information. They even do things like monitoring specific words or phrases in your kids' messages, I think.
Whoa, it's like having a private detective following your kid around online.
Kinda, yeah. But all those extra features come with a price tag. mSpy has all these different pricing tiers, with different levels of features. So you might end up paying more for all the bells and whistles.
Got it. So if you really need all that detailed information, mSpy might be good, but it's not going to be cheap. Or what about Questodio? They seem to have a different vibe.
Yeah, for sure. Questodio is less about spying on your kids and more about helping them develop healthy habits online. They do have monitoring features, but they're really focused on setting screen time limits, blocking certain websites, and encouraging open communication between parents and kids.
So it's not about Big Brother watching everything you do, but more about giving kids the tools to manage their own online lives.
Exactly. It's more of a team effort, which might be better for families who, really value trust and talking things out.
Interesting. Okay, last but not least, there's Aura. We mentioned them earlier. They're more like a whole family protection system, right?
Right. Aura is like the all-in-one package. They have everything.
Yeah.
Identity theft protection, antivirus, a VPN, parental controls, all for one price.
So it's less about monitoring your kid's phone specifically and more about creating a safe online environment for the whole family.
Exactly. And their pricing reflects that. Their plans cover multiple devices, so it can be a lot cheaper than uMobix, which only covers one.
Okay, so we've got a lot of choices here. The direct competitor, XER or XES, the deep dive monitor, mSpy, the healthy habits advocate, Questodio, and the family protector, Aura. That's a lot to think about.
It is, and it just shows that you really need to think about what's important to you before you choose one of these apps. What are you most worried about? Social media, knowing where your kid is, do you want something that covers your whole family, or just focus on your kid's phone? It all depends.
It's like picking a cart, right? All these different models with different features and prices. You got to figure out what's best for you.
Perfect analogy. And just like with cars, there's no best one, only the one that's best for you.
Okay, so we've explored uMobix. We've looked at some of the alternatives. Now what? What does all this mean for parents who are just trying to figure out this whole digital parenting thing?
Yeah, good question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. We've given you the information, the different viewpoints, but in the end, the decision is yours.
Right. We've given you the map, but you got to choose where to go.
Exactly. We can show you the landmarks, the dangers, the different routes, but you have to decide which path is right for you and your family.
And that path might be different for every family, right?
Yeah.
Some parents might feel okay with more monitoring, while others might want to focus on communication and trust.
Absolutely. There's no right or wrong here. It's about what feels right for your family and how you do things. But no matter what you decide, there are some things to keep in mind.
Like what?
Well, the most important thing is to talk. Talk to your kids about the online world. What's good about it? What's bad about it? Tell them what you're worried about. Listen to what they have to say and try to find some common ground. And if you do decide to use a monitoring app, be honest about it. Tell them why you're doing it and what you're going to be looking at.
That's a good point. It's not about being sneaky. It's about working together to stay safe online.
Exactly. And don't forget, technology is always changing. So what works today might not work tomorrow. Stay informed, stay involved, and be ready to adjust your approach as things change.
Well said. So we've reached the end of our deep dive into uMobix and parental monitoring apps. That was a lot, huh?
It was.
Okay.
We've looked at some tough questions, considered different points of view, and hopefully given you what you need to make a good decision for your family.
It really has. This whole deep dive has been eye-opening for sure. I mean, there's so much to think about with this whole parental monitoring thing, more than I realized.
It's definitely more complicated than it looks from the outside. It's not just about, downloading an app. It's about really understanding what it means, the good and the bad, and making choices that, fit with what you believe in as a parent.
Right. It's about finding that balance, protection and trust, guidance and freedom.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's no one right answer. It's all about what works for each family.
You got it. Every family is different. Every kid is different. And what works for one might not work for another. The important thing is to be informed. Think it through and make choices that make sense for you.
So for those parents out there who are listening and feeling a little overwhelmed by all this, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
I think the most important thing is to try to keep things in perspective. Don't let fear control your decisions. It's easy to get caught up in all the what ifs and the worst case scenarios, but that can make us do things that might actually hurt our kids more than help them.
That makes sense. We don't want to be so busy trying to protect them from everything that we end up stopping them from growing up and being independent.
Exactly. We want to help them learn how to be safe and responsible online, not just, watch their every move. And that starts with talking to them, setting clear boundaries, and building that foundation of trust.
That's a great point. Okay, well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. We've gone deep on uMobix, talked about the pros and cons of parental monitoring, and hopefully giving you something to think about as you deal with all this digital stuff with your own family.
It's been a great conversation, and thanks for joining us. Remember, the best thing you can do is to stay involved, stay informed, and stay connected with your kids.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And with that, we'll say goodbye for today. Thanks for listening.